What if the devil didn't just want to tempt you, but wanted the corpse of a prophet to do it? After Moses died, Satan didn't rest. He rose, not to steal a soul, but to seize a body, a dead man's body. Why? Because if he could twist the legacy of God's greatest servant, he could deceive an entire generation. This isn't folklore, it's a biblical mystery hidden in plain sight. And what happened next shook the heavens. The friend of God and the final breath. The sun dipped low over the mountains of Moab, casting golden shadows across the dry terrain. The journey of a man, more than a prophet, more than a leader, was drawing to a close. Moses stood alone, not out of abandonment, but because this final moment was meant to be sacred, personal, divine. He had stood before Pharaoh, faced down plagues, parted the sea, spoken with God face to face. The fire of Sinai still echoed in his spirit. His voice had once thundered with commandments. His staff had struck miracles from stone. But now his time had come. And yet, there were no crowds to mourn, no trumpet blast, no sacred tomb carved into rock. Only silence. And God. The Bible says in Deuteronomy 34:5-6 that Moses died there, in the land of Moab, according to the word of the Lord. And then, something extraordinary happened. Something that has never been recorded before or since. God buried him, not angels, not men. God himself laid Moses to rest. Imagine that. The creator of heaven and earth stooped down to bury his servant. Not just out of duty, but out of honor, out of friendship. This wasn't just a burial, it was a divine embrace, a final act of holy love. But here's where the mystery deepens. The passage makes it clear. No one knows his grave to this day. Why? Why would God hide the location of Moses' burial? Why keep it a secret from the very people he led for 40 years? That silence wasn't accidental. Somewhere in the unseen realm, something stirred. A dark figure, ancient and bitter, had taken notice. Satan, the adversary, the accuser, was not content to let Moses rest. He wanted his body. Not his soul, his body. And he was willing to fight for it. Jude 1:9 gives us a glimpse of a cosmic confrontation. The Archangel Michael, a being of light and authority, clashing with Satan over Moses' remains. This wasn't symbolic, it wasn't a vision. It was a battle, real and raw, waged beyond the veil of human eyes. What could possibly make a lifeless body so valuable that the enemy of God would rise up to claim it? What secret did Moses' body hold? What plan was the devil trying to ruin? As Michael stood his ground, he didn't say, "I rebuke you." He said, "The Lord rebuke you." Even the mightiest angel didn't dare confront Satan in his own strength, because this battle that was bigger than flesh and blood, bigger than a grave, it was a fight over legacy, worship, and the power of memory. And it was only the beginning. Satan's scheme and heaven's resistance. Somewhere between heaven and earth, a clash erupted. Not of swords or armies, but of eternities colliding. In one corner, Michael, the mighty archangel, commander of God's celestial hosts. In the other, Satan, the fallen prince, once clothed in light, now consumed by rage. And the battlefield? The body of a dead man. Not just any man. Moses, the servant, the deliverer, the friend of God. But why? Why would Satan, who prowls after souls, be so obsessed with a lifeless corpse? Here's where the shadows begin to lift, and the chilling truth sets in. This was never about decay. It was about deception. Moses wasn't merely a leader. To Israel, he was a legend. His voice brought down plagues. His hands split the sea. His face once shone with the glory of God. He was a symbol of power, of hope, of divine connection. And Satan knew that symbols, when twisted, become idols. That's what he wanted. He wanted to turn Moses' legacy into a weapon of idolatry. just like the golden calf in the wilderness, just like the bronze serpent that later had to be destroyed because people began worshiping it. Imagine if Israel had found Moses' tomb, built a monument, created relics from his bones, and turned their worship from the unseen God to the visible remains of a man. Satan didn't just want Moses' body, he wanted to hijack his memory, to turn a divine legacy into a distraction from true worship. And he would have succeeded if God hadn't intervened, if Michael hadn't stood guard, if the burial had been public. Satan would have baited generations into bowing before the bones of a prophet instead of the presence of the Almighty. But that wasn't his only plan. Satan is called the accuser of the brethren in Revelation 12:10. He would have used Moses' mistakes as ammunition: the murder of the Egyptian, the shattering of the tablets, the striking of the rock when he was told to speak. He would have pointed and said, "This man failed. This man disobeyed. How can he be worthy of God's promise?" But here's the revelation. God buried Moses not because of shame, but because of love. Because grace doesn't erase your story, it redeems it. In fact, centuries later, Moses stood again, not in shame but in glory, on the Mount of Transfiguration, beside Elijah speaking with Jesus. The same body Satan fought for, God had glorified. The same man who failed at the edge of the Promised Land now stood in the very presence of the Promised One. That's the power of redemption. That's the wisdom of God, to hide what could be worshipped in order to preserve what must be remembered. And that's why, if this deeper look into biblical mystery is lighting a fire in your spirit, hit that like button now. It helps us bring more of these powerful revelations straight to you. And it tells YouTube this message matters. Let's spread truth together. The tactics of the enemy and the temptation to drift. What happened over Moses' body wasn't just a supernatural scuffle, it was a revealing blueprint. Because the enemy's strategy hasn't changed, he still twists what was sacred, still whispers to worship what's visible, still prowls to pollute the pure. What he tried with Moses, he tries with you. Satan wasn't after bones, he was after the hearts of a people. He knew that if he could use Moses' legacy as a golden calf 2.0, he could derail generations. He knew humans are drawn to physical icons when their faith in the invisible God grows weary. The body of Moses, if made public, could have become a shrine, a symbol elevated above the Savior. That's the tactic. Distract, deceive, deify. It's the same with us. When God moves powerfully in our lives through leaders, movements, miracles, the enemy creeps in, tempting us to fixate on the vessel rather than the source. Think about it. How many times has revival turned into ritual? How often does charisma replace Christ? Satan's fight for Moses' body wasn't just about him, it was a masterstroke of spiritual manipulation. Turn the leader into a legend, then turn the legend into a god. But there's more. The enemy also wanted to accuse Moses, to use his lowest moments as eternal shackles. Remember, Moses didn't enter the Promised Land because he disobeyed God in front of the people. In anger, he struck the rock instead of speaking to it and said, "Must we bring water for you?" In that moment, Moses claimed glory that belonged to God alone. It was pride, it was pressure, it was human. And Satan wanted to grab that moment, hold it up like a trophy, and declare to the heavens he's not worthy. But here's what makes God's justice holy and his love unstoppable. Even though Moses failed, God still buried him with dignity. Even though Moses fell, God still defended him from the devil's grasp. Even though Moses disobeyed, God still called him friend. And if Satan's accusations couldn't strip Moses of God's grace, then what makes you think yours will? The same devil who fought for a body is still fighting to convince you that your past disqualifies your future. But the battle over Moses was a warning and a witness that God's plan cannot be derailed by human error or demonic schemes. Michael didn't fight with clever words. He didn't point to Moses' good deeds. He simply said, "The Lord rebuke you." Because that's the secret. Victory isn't about how clean your past is, it's about who stands for you in the present. You don't need to fight Satan with your resume. You fight him by standing under the authority of the one who already won. the legacy we leave, and the worship we choose. Step back with me. Beyond the grave, beyond the battlefield, beyond the clash of angel and adversary, there's a message etched into eternity, hidden in this divine mystery. It's not just about Moses, it's about us. The battle over Moses' body wasn't just a conflict of spiritual beings. It was a living parable, a prophetic warning, a holy whisper to every generation. Beware of misplaced worship. Time and again, Israel stumbled into idolatry. When their faith wavered, they built golden calves. When their eyes couldn't see God, they bowed to what they could see. Even sacred things like the bronze serpent, once a symbol of healing, became objects of worship. They turned reminders into replacements. That's what Satan wanted to do with Moses' body. He wanted the people to venerate the man and forget the God who empowered him. And if we're honest, we're not that different. We idolize leaders. We romanticize movements. We cling to moments of the past. Sometimes we worship the memory of revival more than the presence of God today. We build monuments around people God once used and miss the one he still wants to meet with. So God, in his mercy, buried Moses in secret, not to erase him, but to protect Israel from worshiping what was meant to point them higher. Even in death, God was shepherding his people's hearts. But there's a deeper current flowing here, one that should shake us and comfort us. Moses made mistakes, serious ones that cost him his entry into the Promised Land. And yet, God buried him with honor. God defended his body from the accuser. God glorified him beside Jesus on the Mount of Transfiguration. That's not just grace. That's restoration beyond failure. The devil wanted to make a mockery of Moses' past, but God wrote him into the future, into a moment where heaven literally opened and Jesus stood in radiance. No condemnation, just glory. So what's the message? Don't let the enemy chain you to your past. Don't let success become your idol. Don't let memory replace movement. God is not done writing your story, even if you feel buried by regret. If Satan fought that hard for a man already dead, how much more is he fighting for you because you're still alive and dangerous to the kingdom of darkness? But here's the good news. Just like with Michael, you don't fight alone. You don't resist in your own name. You resist in the power of the one who conquered death. So worship boldly, obey faithfully, and leave a legacy that points not to your name, but to his. Now let me ask you, if Satan tried to twist Moses' legacy, how do you think he's trying to twist yours? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Let's talk about it. And if this message stirred something in you, subscribe for more biblical mysteries, spiritual insight, and truth that fuels your faith. There's more to uncover, and you're not meant to walk this journey alone.